Okay, so good evening, everyone. Once again, this is the final session for TDS for this term. I hope you have enjoyed the journey so far in learning all the new tools. And what I will say is, the end term will have between 40 to 60 questions. And they will be fairly quick to answer. There won't be any math or anything involved. So my suggestion is if you've got TDS and some other subject to answer, then the best thing to do is do TDS first because you can quickly breeze through the paper very rapidly. And don't leave any questions unanswered, okay? Because it will be either MCQ or MSQ. So mark whatever you can and don't leave any blanks. So at least you may score some marks by chance as well. And normally you should be able to finish a paper very quickly, probably 30 minutes or so, 30 or 35 minutes. That will give you plenty of time for your other subject. So to use that to your advantage. We'll be covering module 7, 8, and 9, and then we'll be talking a little bit about HTML, CSS, because there is likely to be questions on that. So I can't guarantee there will be, but it's something we've been asked to tell students to prepare. So, okay. So week 7. Right, so week 7 was about designing your output, and in there were some specific things that were talked about designing output. In particularly, there are tools that you use for designing output, right? So there are some general tools. So there are some general tools, um, and in that you will have Excel. You're expected to be familiar with some things concerning Excel. So some basic types of functions, and what you would use in order to generate to design output in Excel. So there were some videos that were there, two videos in one video in particular which talked about visualizing with Excel, and in there it's good to know what you would use Excel for. So for example, if you have time series data, it's quite good at generating uh, outputs for that. And in time series data, you have functions like forecast. So try and remember the syntax for forecast. I think it was, let me just double check here. Forecast. So forecast would have a target date, and then it would have your historic values. You would have the timeline of those historical values. And it would, so these are the required options. Okay. Then it does have some other extra options, which I'll just briefly mention here, but they are optional, right? So it doesn't matter so much. One is seasonality. By default, I think this is one. And then the other one is data completion. I'll just explain quickly what they mean. Oops, completion. And I think there is also one more thing. This also by default is one, and aggregation.
So a
So
lot of
the
noise is coming.
Yeah, I'll repeat myself because I can't control the background noise. I'm in the office, so there are other TAs or OR sessions at the same time. Uh, so target date is there. That is the date you want the prediction for. That's this particular item here, and then so that's what will give you the prediction. These are the um, historic values that you will be looking at. That is usually a range, and then you have connected with those values. You have the timeline. So these both go together usually, the values and timeline. So usually one of the axis will have the timeline, and one of the axis will have the values, and they'll be connected together. So that will be your uh, historic values, and this will be your future value. Then you have something called seasonality. So sometimes when you have a prediction, it goes up and down like this. It has some seasonality to it. So if it has seasonality, then Excel will continue to make forecast that matches that seasonality. By default, that's turned on, but you can switch that off by pressing zero, by using zero. Another thing forecast ETS function allows you is data completion. So up to 30% of the data can be missing, but only if you use data completion. So then what it does is it tries to fill those values in. And the way it does that is it finds the average between 2 points. So like say, for example, you have um, say 10 or something, and then you have some missing data here, and you have some 20 here. It will put 15 over here to try and compensate for the fact that data is missing. So that's data completion. And the third one is aggregation. So remember, these are optional, okay? Seasonality, data completion, aggregation. They have some default values. All of them usually tend to be one. Aggregation is, let's say you've got uh, several entries that have the same date. So in other words, your timeline has duplicates in them. So then what it does is it will take, so say for example, you have 10, 8, 24, and there's some value 7, and then there is 10, another entry 10, 8, 24, and the value is 8. Then there's another one 10, 8, 24, and the value is 9. So what it'll do is it will club all these together and probably use 8. So that's what aggregation does. Uh, from an exam point of view, I would say this is not that important, but remember this function and how it's constructed, because they can always ask you a question that says how this function works and how do you put the values in. Similar to what Amit was talking about, the ARIMA model, right? They will give you some, they will say, how do you use the ARIMA model, what the P value is, the D value is, the Q value is, and they may ask you some question on that, right? So just keep this function in mind. Um, another thing that you use in Excel would be, uh, you would use filters, of course.
Sir, sir, this is function forecast.ets. This is the
E-
function,
Yes, yes, that's the function in Excel. Um,
and these are the
so
parameters.
yeah, so if you wanted to look it up, you can always go to Google, type this function forecast ETS, type this in Google, and type Excel. Then it will bring up the help for it. Microsoft has put the help online with all
And
the.
we can put this directly into Excel also. No?
Oh, of course, yeah. The reason I mentioned that is not everybody has Excel, right? So that's why I mentioned. But yeah, of course, if you put this in Excel also, it'll give you the help. So then you can see. But the nice thing about the online help is I think they have a worksheet which demonstrates how this works. So you can see that. In fact, I can probably show you that. That might be helpful. Just give me a second here. Let's do that one. So this sheet comes directly out of that Microsoft help, okay, from online. They had a worksheet that gives you an example. So again, you can see over here, this A61, that's the target date we are forecasting for. This is the Y values, the red color, the historic values. And then this is the timeline, the third element in that function. So that's the timeline. And you can see they're connected to each other, right? And then these are the optional parameters, seasonality, and the other one being data completion, and then there is a third one, date aggregation. So you don't have to fill these in because by default it fills them in. And then you get the output. This is the output in the chart, and you can see there are three types of predictions done. The reason there are three is because they've done some adjustments to it in terms of uh, getting a lower bound, and if you look here, getting some upper bound or something like that. But that's not important. The important thing is how do you use this formula, right? So this one, the forecast.ets formula. Don't worry about these other two, but that's how you get it. So just keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so the next thing. So any doubts so far, or is that quite clear? Okay. Just open your mics and say, right? Because sometimes I can't see the screen while I'm sharing the screen. So, okay. Right. So next thing, of course, in Excel, you can use things like filters, pivot tables. Um, these all help you with the creation, with the creation of creating outputs, ranges, um, variants. So the reason I mention this is in the video, if you see, show you here real quick. This is a video really worth watching. Which is this one here, the visualizing forecast with Excel. If you have not seen this, watch this video. It's really worth watching because in here, Sir has very beautifully explained how do you get things like the range and how you get things like, and he goes literally step by step. And so there's always a possibility they'll ask you some question where they ask you, like, for example, how you find the variance. So, I mean, here he goes through this process of how he went about finding the variation. He took the standard deviation and divided it by the value over here in the average that he got over here. So just watch this video and just see how he computes these things. Those will be useful for you to know. They won't ask you any calculations, but they may, like, for example, tell you a formula and ask you to choose the right one or something. Okay? So that's always possible. So just go through this video. It's very short. It's not very long. The beginning part of it is more informational, but as I think somewhere around this point where he starts constructing uh, this bit over here, he starts constructing all these forecasts and things. Just give it a watch through and see how he does it. Um, Sometimes they ask questions like, how do you insert a spark line? Something very mundane like that, okay? They ask questions like that. So it's not difficult. You just have to know what the answer is. And here he converted the date into an integer. And the reason he did that is so that he could do forecasting, because that's how he got forecasting. He needed integer values for it. So he took the date value from here and then he put it into int and he got these values. So give this video a watch, okay? I won't go through this because it's It's something you guys can do when you have some time. Visualizing with, okay, before I go to visualizing PowerPoint. So yeah, so range, variance, spark lines. So spark lines, the simple ways, you go to insert, say spark lines, and then line. So that's the workflow for spark lines. Um, when you convert a date into integer, there may be a question, when does it start from? So it starts from number of days since 1980. Uh, small little things like that they may ask. Um, there's a growth function as well, similar to the forecast function. Um, that's got y values, x values, and a prediction x. Standard deviation, it's STD, EV. So that's another one. Correlation, so CORREL. Let me show my notebook again, so you can follow along. You're able to see my screen, right? The notes that I'm showing you.
Yes,
Hello?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
come.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Right. So yeah. So variance, spark lines. So just learn the workflow of this, okay? Which is you go insert and you go spark lines, and then I think it's called something like that. You can experiment and see for yourself how that works. Uh, growth is a function in Excel. So it's similar to forecast. It's got y values, x values. And then the prediction. So for example, in the one that Anand showed, you have the historic currency values, you have the integer as dates, sorry, dates as integers, I meant, and then you have the forecast date that you give it. So then it will produce the predicted y value. Then the next thing is standard deviation. So again, the function we are talking about, they won't ask you to compute it. They just ask you about the function, standard deviation. And then when you do standard deviation divided by the mean, it gives you the variation as a percentage. There's a function called correl, which is correlation, gives you the R square. Then if you want to create a correlation chart, again, I know it's a stupid question, okay, but unfortunately for the end term, it's difficult to give you a practical exam. So the question will be like, how do you create a correlation chart? Basically, you pick two columns, then insert chart, and then select scatter plot. Uh, you can add a trend line, and this is done by right clicking. And then you can say you want it to be linear, so you get a straight line that shows the correlation. And then of course, if you want the equation, now they won't ask you this whole thing, okay? This whole thing they will not ask. They may ask something like, okay, how do you find the equation of the trend line? So if you're aware of the process, then you can answer the question, right? So you can say display equation, oops, equation on chart. And then you can also get the R square the same way. You just say display R square. This is all available in Excel, okay? So you can give it a try and see. The next thing is uses of charts. So the other thing in Excel you can get, of course, are things like bar charts. Learn the uses of them. So bar charts. Can anyone tell me what the purpose of bar charts is generally? If you give me answers, it'll go quicker. No one wants to try. Am I still connected? I'm not even sure I'm connected.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a source distribution.
You'll have to be more specific than that.
For categorical data?
Yes, it's for comparing categorical data. So that's correct. Oops. Compare. Okay, so bar charts, then line charts. So that's for anyone wants to let me know what line charts are for.
To identify the trends.
Yeah, trends over time usually. Okay, but yeah, trends. That would be a good reason to use that. Then pie charts. Pie charts. So what would you use pie charts for?
Propose.
Yeah, proportion or parts of a whole, maybe we could say.
Yeah, parts.
Parts of a whole.
Okay.
Pardon? I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Then histograms. Anyone wants to let me know what histograms are used for?
Distribution.
Yeah. Distribution. That's right. Distribution of a numerical value. Okay, then heat maps. That's another good visualization, right? So heat maps. What would we use heat maps for?
Correlation.
Yes, you can use it for correlations, but there is so yeah, I'll write that down. That's true, correlation. But it's also to see the magnitude of data across two dimensions.
Okay.
But yeah, this is also correct. Okay, this is not wrong. Magnitude of data across two dimensions.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining, and I hope we'll meet in Paros.
Okay. I apologize for my terrible writing. It's legible, right? Okay, and then last one, tree maps. I guess no one answered, so it must be terrible. If you guys can't read what I'm writing, then let me know. Okay, I'll just slow down a bit and write more neatly.
It's fine, Kantan. It's fine.
Okay, so tree maps. What do we use tree maps for? Anyone wants to?
Networking directions to show.
Yeah, it would be fair to say usually it's hierarchical.
Hierarchical, yeah.
Connection between two things.
Yeah, I would say hierarchical data, right? I mean, so, because normally a tree map would have something at the top, something. I mean, they're usually in rectangles actually. It would be like that, and then you would have something like that over here, and then something like. So it's usually to represent hierarchical data, tree maps. Network diagrams are for more for showing connections between things. So yeah, so these are the various kinds of things that can be done for generating output. Then the next thing you should be aware of is there are so this is still all general tools, okay, for providing output, which is this thing we're talking about here. Okay, general tools. So there are some other general tools as well. They're called BI tools or business intelligence. Oops. Okay, business intelligence tools. So some examples of that would be Google Studio or Google Data Studio, I should say, Google's Data Studio, Power BI, and Tableau. So this is an easy one to get confused with. Okay, so if you remember in week 2, we used a library called Tabula. Okay, that's TABL, Tabula. Okay, we use this library. That's not the same as this. Sometimes they ask questions about BI tools or something like that, or they may ask a question about PDF scraping and I'll say which library should you use or something like that. Remember this one, this one here is the Python library for PDF scraping, and this is a common mistake students can make. Whereas this is an actual a business intelligence tool. Oops, sorry. Tableau is Tableau is a business intelligence tool, similar to Power BI. We haven't actually had any videos about it, but it's important for you to know that they use these. So that's because they may ask a question about it. So that's why I mentioned it. Then there are some specialized tools. So far we discussed generalized tools. With regards to Power BI, there is a video on the dashboard, right? Oh, sorry, not dashboard, on the portal. So watch that video about Power BI. I know it's something that most people don't have access to because it's generally a paid piece of software now. But at least watch the video and just be familiar with it. They won't ask anything complicated or difficult or unusual, but they may ask like what Power BI is used for. What can you do with Power BI, right? So there may be some options that says used to generate charts by giving a text description, because that's what it can do. It can take almost like an LLM. It can take a textual description and then generate charts and generate useful information for you. So it's a very useful tool. It's used by a lot of organizations as well. So watch the video and just be familiar with it, okay, what it does. Google's Data Studio is in a similar vein. They use it to create reports and charts and things. So that's about the general tools. Now there are some specialized tools. What's the time so far? 8:40. Okay. I'll try and wrap up on time. Specialized tools. So specialized tools would be Flourish. And then it's used for making animated charts. I do apologize if this session is boring, but this is with view of the exam. Okay, so that's why I'm doing this for you guys. And some question they may ask about Flourish is what kind of data Flourish can use for generating charts. It can import Excel, CSV, TSV, which is tab separated values, JSON data it can accept, GeoJSONs, oops, GeoJSONs, Google Sheets. You can directly connect a Google Sheet. And normally we used to have graded assignments so that you could actually use Flourish to create some pretty cool looking things. But unfortunately this term we didn't have sufficient, we weren't able to give you sufficient time to actually do the assignment. So you missed out on that learning exercise. But if you get a chance, give it a try, okay? So Google Sheets or a URL. I think it also allows you to import things from Canva nowadays. So just keep a rough idea in mind of where you can import data into Flourish. So that's about Flourish, a specialized tool for creating animated charts. Then Kumu is the other one. Again, we used to have assignments to create Kumu networks, but we didn't provide you one this time. So Kumu is used for network visualization. So just remember that from the endpoint perspective, sorry, end term perspective, network visualization. Okay, and in Kumu, when you import data and you want to create network visualizations, it's important that you have a from and a to field that creates the relationship. They may ask you questions regarding that. And it also allows you for weights. So you can add a weight to this relationship in Kumu. So that's also possible. So then the last one would be another specialized tool for designing output would be QGIS. QGIS. And that's for geographic visualizations. I'm aware I use the American spelling and the British spelling here. Okay, right. Geographic visualization. So that's about the two types of tools you can use for visualization output, and that's in week 7. There are other things that you have to be aware of with regards to the exam. One is you also need to know about a few libraries. When I say know about a few libraries, I'm talking specifically because they're used for visualizations. So one would be the SciPy. Oops. SciPy library, and its use is okay. So this is not directly used for visualization, but it's a tool that's used. And the reason I mentioned this is in one of the notebooks, they specifically use this function, which is called SciPy dot sparse. And they from this module they import CSR matrix. So you just got to mug up what this CSR matrix is. Anyone wants to let me know what this CSR means in CSR matrix?
Is it a way to store zeros and ones efficiently?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So it's compressed sparse row matrix. Okay. And it's used in situations where you've got lots of zeros in the matrix. And the reason we use it is when you're doing matrix multiplications, it makes it very fast for doing vector products. So that's why this format is used, the CSR format, compressed sparse row format. Otherwise, it's very computationally intensive to do vector products. If there's lots of zeros, the computer will do lots of useless calculations. So that's why I use this. So just remember what it's used for. It's for doing fast vector products, fast matrix vector products. So just keep that in mind for the exam. The other thing is libraries used for network. So these are these are networks. These are libraries used for network analysis, I should say. And the next thing is scikit network. Okay, scikit network. Just know what it's for. Okay, it's a library used for network analysis. You don't really need to know much of the details in there because it wasn't used in any of the modules. So it's very. I'd be very surprised if they asked any questions particularly related to it. But you have to just know that it's used in network analysis. Then another one is called network X. Okay, network X, there are 3 functions you should remember. And that is pandas edge list. So you feed it a pandas data frame and it creates an edge list matrix from it. Okay, that's what this function does. And then the other 2 functions are all shortest paths. So this one gets you an array which shows you all the shortest paths to a particular source. So if you choose a source node, it'll give you all the shortest paths. So that's what this function is for. And then the third function is the last one, shortest path. So this gives you, as you can see, the shortest path from one node to another. So the reason these 3 I mentioned in particular is because it was used in a notebook to demonstrate how to calculate the shortest path between 2 actors. Again, you don't need to know all the details of how it works or the algorithm or anything like that. Just remember these functions, just have a quick look on the documentation for network X and just look up these 3 functions. It's very easy. Their documentation is very good. You just type in the little search icon and it will show you these functions and its parameters that go into them. So for the end term, just remember those, okay? So these were for network analysis, these 3. So they may ask you a question, which libraries are used for network analysis? You just have to mug that up. Mugging is my least favorite activity because I don't really think it's learning, but that's where we are. Okay, libraries for visualizations. So there are again 3 libraries. This one you don't have to remember any functions, just know what these libraries are. So matplotlib, this you would have been familiar from your stats course. Seaborn is another one, which is actually built on top of matplotlib. So Seaborn is another one. And then Plotly. So these are for libraries for visualization. Just remember their names and that should be sufficient. Okay, so that covers module 7. Any questions so far of anything we have discussed? You'll have to open your mic, okay, and just let me know. Because okay. All right, so next we will go to module 8, which is data storytelling. So in here, the key concepts for data storing is first of all, let me ask a question like, what is data storytelling, right? And that's just the practice of translating data analysis. So far you've done all the analysis, you have scraped the data, you produced some charts, all that. But then you have to tell a story with it, right? So data storytelling is the practice of translating data into a narrative so that it's compelling and easy to understand for your audience. So that's what data storytelling is. Then there are some components of a data story. So this module and data. Okay, so there are some components of a data story. Of course, you have the data. I mean, without the data, there's no data storytelling, right? It provides the facts and figures. And then you've got the visuals. And the visuals are your charts, your graphs, your images that support the narrative and makes the data easier to interpret. And the third is the narrative itself. That's the storyline that connects the data with the visuals. So that's what the narrative does. It connects these two and provides context and insight. So that's what data storytelling is. And there are many ways to narrate a story, through numbers, through visuals, to text. Anand sir, there's a video at the very start of that talks about it. Again, there is a video on Power BI. Just have a quick watch through, see what it's able to do. And you will get some very simple, basic question about what is Power BI or what it can do. They may give you some options. Power BI can do this, and it will be obviously wrong. So select the ones that just make sense. Okay. Then narratives with Excel. Of course, we talked about it in the previous modules. So I'm not going to discuss that. And next about data storytelling. There are some techniques that Anand sir mentioned in his video. So some of the techniques are, for example, a hero's journey, right? Where they have a cartoon and it's called a hero's journey. So there's a narrative structure where the hero faces some challenges, overcomes them, and achieves a conclusion. So that's one aspect of it. Then another storytelling. So these are called storytelling techniques. Storytelling.
Talking about Govinda's, that Jolie.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good storytelling technique, right? So, yeah, so, but this encompasses things like cartoons and things. So sometimes you've seen visualizations with cartoons and things, right? So
Yeah.
that's what would, yeah. So then there's contrast and, oops. Then there is, so these are storytelling techniques. So hero's journey is one. Contrast and comparison is another method. And there what you do is you highlight the differences or similarities in data to make a point. Okay. Then cause and effect is another one. This is where you show how one event or a variable influences another. So cause and effect is another storytelling technique. And Anand, in one of the videos, he demonstrated how he put together a group of securities and then blocked them by their movement in a correlation chart. And then the company that he had sent the data to were able to make a major purchasing decision based on that story that was told through that chart, right? So there he used a sort of cause and effect method to show that. So definitely watch that video. It's one of those optional videos, but it was a great video because it shows the power of data to help businesses make decisions. So cause and effect. Then the last one is trends and behaviors. So that's another storytelling technique. Okay. So those are the 4 storytelling techniques. Then the tools that you use for data storytelling, Tableau, Power BI, these are the tools. Again, Python libraries like Plotly, Matplotlib, Seaborn. Dash is another one, Dash. Dash to this. Okay, Dash. Just remember these names. And then there are some storyboarding tools. Okay, so those were data visualization tools. There are some storyboarding tools. So an example of storyboarding tools would be something like Canva would be a storyboarding tool. PowerPoint would be one, because you can make some great sorts of stories that you can tell through it. Of course, Google Slides, I think it's called. Keynote. Those are all sorts of storyboarding tools. And then you've got, there's another tool you can use for data storytelling. And it can be something even like Jupyter Notebooks, right? If you think about it. So, and we would call that a narrative building tool. Jupyter Notebooks. Because you can make some markdown cells in there. So Jupyter Notebooks lets you do 2 things, right? On the one hand, you have your code blocks, which actually do the processing. And then you've got the markdown, which you can produce quite rich documentation that goes with these code blocks. So you're able to tell a story through that. And in fact, you've seen many examples of Jupyter Notebooks where it takes you through the process and tells you the analysis and the story, right? So those are examples. I don't like this word. Jupyter Notebooks, okay. Common pitfalls in data storytelling. So don't overload people with data. That's one. Pitfalls, I'll call this. And don't produce misleading narratives, which is an ethical consideration. And ignoring the audience. So this last one is basically failing to tailor your story to the audience needs, right? So they may be looking, so a company that's asked you to produce some report about something. If your story doesn't at all talk about the concerns they have, then it's useless, right? The analysis. So don't ignore the audience. First of all, their level, just what level of people you're pitching to. If you're pitching to someone who's technically advanced, then perhaps Jupyter Notebook would be good. If you're pitching to some sales exec, then maybe you might use something like Canva. So it just depends on who your audience is. So don't ignore the audience in your storytelling. And that covers week 8. Okay, so fairly straightforward, not much in week 8. Week 9 is about deployment of your um, of the things you have produced so far in your data journey. So in deployment, okay, before I continue, any questions so far? So I'm going to assume that silence means no questions.
No.
Okay. All right. So in deployment, some key concepts to remember would be deployment is basically the process of integrating like your data science model or your application into an operational environment where it can be accessed and used by various end users. So that's what deployment is. And the deployment pipeline, I would call it, right, is basically a series of steps that you would use to move your model from where it sits nicely on your computer to a place where others can use it. So they can provide inputs to it, see how the model reacts and how it develops over time and things of that stuff. So that's what deployment generally is in, what's involved in deployment. And then it has a life cycle and all those sort of things, but those are not important. I think the important bits here would be what tools you would use for deployment. So one of the things that was talked about before you deploy is you should anonymize data. And so there are some tools that were discussed about it. Arcs and amnesia was the other one. Amnesia. Again, they're not going to ask you how these tools specifically will be used. They will just, give you a list and say, which of these tools can be used for anonymizing data. So you can just remember the names.
How do you know what they are not going to ask?
Primarily because experience about what kind of questions they would not ask. And it goes through a vetting process, right? So and through that vetting process, they will remove questions that generally students don't have practice with these tools, right? So
Yeah, I
what
mean,
they will,
that's a major, I mean, that's the reason I asked, because let's say you talk about Power BI or Tableau, etc. Without a license, it's very difficult to talk
correct.
about, hierarchies and groups and
Yes.
trees and all that stuff. No one will know. At least I won't
Correct.
remember. If I had not used it earlier, I would not remember any of this.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the reason why they wouldn't ask. And we flag these questions. If these kind of questions come up in the, see, I don't know what questions will be asked in the end, okay? But what I do know is when we look at the whole sets of all the questions that could possibly come, we flag questions that would be unfair to students, right? We'd say, students don't have access to this tool or things of that nature.
Okay.
So that's the reason I say that.
No, now I understand better.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out, so how to take the inputs that I'm getting in the.
Yeah. But if it's in the video, right? If it's in a video, they've shown you something. They're not going to expect you to learn how to do all those things. And
But that I get. The
yeah.
video content, of course, is the baseline.
Yes, correct. That's exactly how you should deal with it.
Okay.
It's not only the baseline; it's the limit of what they can ask you.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, they won't ask you anything beyond what we have either taught you, which includes this session, or you know, anything that would be on the web. So they will not expect you to like know pandas in detail or anything. But over the term, we have used a lot of various functions and things, right? So they may ask you one or two simple things in that process.
Got it.
That would be fair, right? So
Yeah, understood.
okay. So the next thing is libraries. What libraries? Just remember these names. So it'd be things like Faker and Mimesis. And I myself don't remember exactly what they were used for. But if you watch the video that Anand had produced, he explains a little bit about these. Okay, so just remember what they're used for. Okay, I know it's for anonymizing data, but there was a little more specific use cases he mentioned. I think particularly Faker was to generate fake data, if I remember correctly. I mean, that's one way to anonymize things, right? So you would generate fake names, for example, or things of that nature. And then I'm not sure what mimesis, I don't know how you say this, mimesis. So just remember the names, go through the video and just see what he mentioned, what it's used for, okay? Unfortunately, I don't remember and I didn't look it up, so I do apologize for that. Right, another way to deploy, so after anonymizing the data, then we build the app, right? So building the app you could do in Colab, or now for some reason he mentioned Kaggle, I'm not sure why, but it has been mentioned. So, but these are like notebooks, he mentions it under notebooks. And then data apps. And we did demonstrate an example of data apps. So one of them would be Streamlit. Oops. Streamlit. And Shiny is the other one. And then of course you have web apps themselves, which use things like Flask, Tornado, and you can put a whole bunch of things under here. Okay, Vue, whatever, React, anything. So once we build the app, then of course we host the app, and hosting the app can happen on various platforms. So like AWS, Cloud, Google Cloud. They can be deployed from containers like Docker or Kubernetes. So just I don't have. I'm not going to write all of those down. Do you want me to write all those down, or you guys are okay with that? You know what I'm saying, right? When I say cloud platforms, and okay, maybe I better write it down. So for deployment, when you deploy something, you can use platforms, cloud platforms. So they would be like AWS is Amazon Web Services. And then you have Google Cloud Platform. And Microsoft Azure, of course. I forgot to mention that. So these, and then of course you also have Heroku. Actually, we did show that in one of the sessions. So that's a place where you could deploy things like that. And I think Iran had on Discourse provided some list of collated some information on with all these various modules. I highly recommend looking at her post, okay, because she has done a great job putting together all these things. So definitely go through the things that she has
Would
mentioned.
would Heroku be considered a platform?
I mean, we use it for deployment, right? I'm talking about tools for deployment. So we deploy on Heroku, right?
No, you were listing. You said you're listing on platforms, which is I was asking, not for any
Oh,
other
right,
area.
right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Heroku would be basically a service as a software as a service type application, right? So, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Just give me 1 second here. So, yeah, so I guess Heroku would come under what we would call like hosting apps. So Heroku, Glitch, and then infrastructure-based hosting would be these cloud platforms that I mentioned earlier. So these would be the infrastructure type hosting things. And then,
Heroku provides infrastructure. That's why it is hosting. But
yeah,
these AWS, GCP, and Microsoft provide computing also,
yes,
which is different from hosting.
yes, that's correct. Yeah. Then the other thing I was going to mention was in Anand's video, if you look under hosting app, he segregates them into content, apps, and infra. And so just keep in mind those things. In fact, I will just quickly, so under content, he mentions GitHub and Dropbox. And then under apps, he mentions Heroku and Glitch. And then under infra, he mentions AWS, Azure, and all the other things, like the other ones I mentioned up here anyway. These ones that I mentioned up here. So that comes under infra he talked about. Just be aware of what these things are, okay? I don't think they will ask you any complicated question regarding that. It'll just be a knowledge thing rather than anything that's truly valuable. Okay. What else have we left? Okay, yeah. So this next thing I want to mention as well. So challenges in deployment, right? So what are some of the challenges you will face in deployment? So one is scalability. Yeah, you have to ensure that as the number of users and the data volume grows, that your deployment is able to scale. So scalability is a challenge. The other challenge is security is a challenge when you deploy. When you're testing your model locally and all, this is not too much of a consideration. But once you deploy it, security also becomes an issue. So you have to protect the model, the data from unauthorized access. And also in this, a very important part of it is ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations. This is very, very crucial. Because if you follow the regulators, then you can have your business shut down as well. So security is important. And another challenge in deployment is latency. So you want to minimize. So what I mean by latency here is I'm not talking about how quickly your web hosting platform responds. I'm talking about when you use a model, a data model, and you put inputs, how quickly can it generate an output for you, right? So that's what I mean by latency. If it takes um, hours to generate the response, maybe in some applications that may be acceptable, but maybe in others it might not be, right? So it's a consideration is what I'm saying. Latency, challenges of deployment. Then integration. This also is a, so what I mean by integration is ensuring that the model works well with other systems and other data sources in your production environment. So integration is a challenge of data of deployment. A good example of latency is the early LLM models, right? When they started out, the response rate was slow and it took time and things like that. But nowadays, if you see, it's very, very fast. So that's why they've deployed it for the public to use. Because as soon as you enter it, it's kind of responds like almost like a real person immediately, right? So that's an kind of an example, a silly example, but you get the idea. So scalability, security, latency, integration are challenges of deployment. And that kind of covers it all, I think. Yeah, okay. That's it. That's all I wanted to mention for module 7, 8, and 9 from an end term perspective. I know these sessions are not my favorite ones because there's not much learning, but a lot of dry material. I hope it was useful to you. Before I continue to something else, which is HTML and CSS, just a brief review of it, in particularly CSS selectors. Is there any questions you have at this point?
Nothing. Nothing.
Okay. Right. So, okay. Once again, I would highly recommend. I think it was June 20th. There was a session done on CSS selectors. I mean, there were other things in that session as well, but I think it was a very well a session that covered CSS selectors really well. There's likely to be a question on it, or more than one question on it in your end term. But if none shows up in there, don't hang the messenger. Okay, I'm just told that students should prepare these
There
things.
have been questions on CSS selectors in previous year papers also, so I think it's fair to assume it can come.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't, it is fair to assume that it can.
Correct. Correct. So definitely spend some time to prepare for it. Okay. Whether it comes or not, I can't say because I really don't know what will come in the end term. But we've been told to tell students to prepare it. Okay. So I'll go over by using probably GA 2.9 because that would have been good. So before I even do that, let me.
Gautam, your QGIS, the one session that you have taken, have you uploaded that session? I wanted to have a look at it. Or is it private?
So no. So QGIS. I think the best thing to do is watch the video that was on the portal itself because
No, that I have seen, but I would have liked to see what you have done in the session. Like, if you can put it on the means YouTube.
Yeah, we
If
didn't
you
do much
share it.
specifically that day on QGIS because there was some issue with importing the data. I had forgotten how to import the data, which is kind of
I thought
embarrassing.
your session went very well that day, just that you didn't record it, if I'm not mistaken.
It could be. I don't remember. It might have been recorded. I'm not sure, but
No, I don't think you recorded. You were going through, you were importing a lot of data, like about 78 million rows, etc. You were explaining how to do it.
Oh yeah, I remember now. Yes, yeah. That was a very good session. Yeah, but okay, okay. I'll see what I can make available. No promises though. Okay. What I mean, the reason I say no promises because I'm trying to think from an end term perspective. From a learning perspective, I understand, but from an end term perspective, it might not be
No, this is not for end term. Like, after we, after the end term, if you want to go through,
Yes,
it is very interesting because this is the only course which is very practical and do some R&Ds on that. So if
Okay,
you
yeah.
want to keep on doing with datas and because we'll lose that once
Yes.
if we don't practice once in a while.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'll. What we'll do is perhaps after the end term, I'll see if I can upload a video going through that process that we did that day. Okay. Okay. So one thing I wanted to show you in terms of preparing for dealing with CSS selectors, some good resources. Of course, W3 Schools is always good. Um, uh, in particular, I think it was. Where was it? I think it was this bit over here. So just understanding the basics of CSS selectors. That is, using a hash is for elements with ID. Using a dot are for elements with the class attribute. Star selects all. So just remembering those sorts of things. When you use a comma, it's and I will demonstrate this shortly. It basically selects each of those elements that you use a comma with, things like that. So, but what I found more useful than W3 is this one, MDN. This was very, very good. So if you go into Google and type CSS selector, it's like the third or fourth one down. That one is actually the bee's knees, as they say. It's really good stuff. Here they really explain it fantastically. So when you're doing your prep, just go through this. Okay, it's very, very useful to know. So one example is when you've got more than one selector, and let's say these both were H1. Okay, this one says H1, says color blue, and this one
You're
also
not
says
sharing
H1.
a screen, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. One second. Mm. Can you see it now?
Yes.
So yeah, so when you've got like H1 over here, and let's say there's H1 here as well, one thing to remember is when CSS is running, it will always use the last one. So if this was H1 over here as well, and this was blue and this was green, and I'll demonstrate that in a little bit, it will always choose the latest one to override the previous one if both of them are the same. So that's one thing. Then see, when you combine two of them, it will search all H1 tags as well as all, remember dot is for class, so it will search all classes that are called special and apply it to it. This again is the same thing, but in just a slightly different way. So this resource, this MDN web docs, which is like the third or fourth one down from the top when you search in Google, this is even better than the W3 schools. So this is what I actually recommend rather than the W3 schools. So then another thing to remember is invalid class selectors get ignored, right? So H1 will still be styled. This is an invalid selector, so this one will be ignored. Okay. And then if you combine a valid one and an invalid one, then neither of them will be neither of them will work. So, and here you can see, so this is a normal tag, this is for a class, and this is for an ID. So just remember that type, class, and ID. That's how you reference them. Then okay, maybe now would be a good time to show a demonstration. So if you remember this from our that session that I was talking about, so we had some HTML, and there were some tags, and there were some selectors that we used to get at them. So, And I talked about these things, how these selectors work. So here in this case, this dot represents a class. So class main menu. A space and UL means all UL children. Another space means all LI children of UL. And then this is a pseudo class when you have this colon. So it just says the last child of LI. So it will be the in a list. So if you look back at this, so we were looking at this one here. So if you look over here, you would have so dot menu, main menu would pick up these three tags. Then it would because it's coupled with the UL. So now it would look for UL children. Okay, so this one doesn't have a UL child, so it doesn't pick up the P. This one does have a UL child, so it will pick up this segment here. You can see my cursor, right? Okay, yeah. So it will pick up this one here, and then this LI is a child under UL, and we use the pseudo class called last child, so it will pick up this contact us, and you can see it does the same thing over here. And the same thing happens here as well. Here we have a main menu class, a UL child, an LI child of the UL, and the last one. So it will pick up customer service. So that's what it does. So that's how it works. I won't go through each and every one, but important things to remember are it goes from left to right. If it is clubbed like this, then you will so then this main menu class has to be part of the UL tag. So this would be represented by this particular construction. Another thing to remember is these I think the technical term for this, let me just see. They're called combinators. So this combinator that you see, this angled bracket, or you can call it greater than sign or whatever you want to call it. This combinator means a direct child only. If there is a space, it's all children. So it would pick up. So if I go a bit further up, so this would pick up all ULs, all children, because there is just a space in between. But when you use this one, and this is regardless of nesting level, okay? So if UL was 3 levels deep, 4 levels deep, whatever, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, it will pick up all of them under the main menu because there is just a space. But when you use this combinator, this arrow like symbol or angled bracket symbol, it will only pick up the direct children. So that's what this, so just remember that, that's very important. And then another example of a selector is you're giving not just the type, but you're also giving the attribute inside it. So that's always given with this angled bracket. So here we are saying href has to be this. So if you look over here, if it was just the A tag, it would have picked up all three. But because we have said href, which is the attribute, and we have also specified what kind of href, which is example.com. So it will only pick up this particular one. And so you can see here, that's exactly what it's done. So that's how selectors work. Okay, very straightforward example. Again, here they talk about pseudo classes. So when you are hovering over an A link, that's a pseudo class. Then this is combinators it talks about. So please go through this. You will find this immensely beneficial to you. It's free marks, okay? If you study this, you're likely to get, okay, I won't say free marks, but you know what I mean. If you study this well, it's easy to score in this, okay? Because it's very straightforward. Another operator is this star. Star means everything. So in this case, it would look for the article tag, and it would look for all tags under the article tag, because remember the space represents all children, and it would look at all first childs. So if there were LIs, a list of LIs, then it would take the very first one, because that's what this pseudo class means. So again, all this information is given in here, what they mean. So if you want to know about pseudo classes and pseudo elements, it's given here. Last child, only child, invalid, all examples of pseudo classes, first child. So if you look on this example here, this is why I love this resource. It's very, very good. So there's the article tag. So it says article, and then it says the p tag. So there are two p tags inside here. First child. So this p tag is the first child. This is the second child, or the last child, I should say, to be more precise. So it will pick up this tag when you say p first child. Okay, and you can see the effect because that's what this selector does. It increases the font size and font weight, and it gives you this result over here. So pseudo classes, pseudo elements. And the reason why they ask these questions is because you remember in ROE also learning to deal with classes and selectors was crucial in ROE, and so that's why they still ask this even in the end term. These are the only questions that will take a little bit of time to do, but it's actually very straightforward. Once you understand the rules, it's very quick and easy to answer these. Don't worry about cascade layers. I don't think they will ask about this. I have not seen them ask about cascade layers, but definitely go to this about specificity, inheritance, combinators. These first few sections: building blocks, selectors, type, class, ID selectors, attributes, pseudo classes, combinators, and this. Up till here, I think it's okay. Beyond that, I highly doubt they will ask you anything, because beyond that is mostly for web developers. But this is the useful part for us when we are doing scraping. So that's why these are worth knowing. Okay. I know that was a bit of a whirlwind tour, but I'm aware that you, of course, have other subjects to study as well. But hopefully, I've given you all the things you require. Oh, that's another thing I forgot to mention. There was a video specifically about JavaScript, right, in week 2. At least learn the things that he talked about in there. I've kind of put them all together in this single file. There was a copy, there was a $. I think I mentioned it in the previous review session as well. Just learn how he constructed this, okay? What were the various important elements like this ternary operator, and what this query selector does. Again, see, you can notice here also, same thing, very, very important. CSS selectors. All these are CSS selectors, right? So definitely please learn this, okay? It will give you marks in the final if they ask you questions on that. Okay, I'm done really, unless you've got any other questions. Let's see, can we accept? So probability of questions is, yeah. So Swapnil, it is equal probability for all weeks. There is no skewness. That's what I've been told. Equal weightage for all weeks. Anything else you guys want to ask? Okay. In that case, I would say all the best and good luck for your. Well, I won't say good luck, but really all the best for your revision. And in terms of luck, I would say mark all the answers that you don't know as well. Could we share
Carlton, please
today's?
share, yes. Carlton, please
Okay.
share this file.
I'm embarrassed by it. It's got all these ugly squiggles on it.
Yeah, that is much more than
No,
what I
please
have
do share.
in
Yeah.
my sheet, right? I have nothing. So please
Okay,
share
okay.
this.
All right, all right. Normally, yeah, okay. I'll send a PDF on Discourse or something. Okay. And maybe I might add some things to it so it's a little more useful to you or what have you. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. And
So when will you get this recorded?
normally it takes at least a day before it gets uploaded. So by tomorrow afternoon, most likely. In fact, I'll stop the recording now.